Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo! I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from Barclays Center, where the Lakers beat the Nets 125-109 to improve to 30-19 and finish their 8-game road trip at 5-3. The Grammy trip is finally over after a couple of weeks. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to everybody in the late night gang. Nice win for the Lakers, right? Like, this is not an opponent that we're going to take away too much from, but the Lakers basically turned into the Harlem Globetrotters out there with 31 fast break points tonight. You had LeBron and Luka diming teammates up left and right for lobs and no-look dunks and layups, and Austin Reaves had the highlight of the game with Austin Reaves returned first and foremost, but Austin Reaves had the highlight of the game with an incredible off the backboard assist to LeBron, which technically was not logged as an assist, but quite the pass from Austin. And yes, I'm in the same hotel. I did not move hotels to go to Brooklyn, just trained it over there. But Lakers win 125-109. They are officially done with the road trip. They will now return home, where they'll have 4 home games before the All-Star break and then another 4 home games coming out of the All-Star break. So an 8-game homestand for the Lakers. Let's just get into the game because we have a lot to touch on with today's show. I want to recap the road trip quickly, then get into the game for a little bit, and then get into all the madness that's going on right now, because crazy day in the NBA with the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, the James Harden trade. You had this new report from Mark Stein about the Lakers and Giannis that just dropped. You had a report earlier from ESPN about LeBron and the Lakers, and to no surprise, LeBron is expected to be a Laker through the deadline and the rest of the season. So a lot to touch on. But first, we got to start with just looking back at the road trip. So Buha's big picture off of tonight's game is recapping the road trip. Lakers go 5-3. And in my opinion, this was a very predictable trip. That was the record that I predicted for LA on this trip. I think it's pretty straightforward. When they play an average to bad team, they're going to win the game. When they play a good team, at least as of recently, they are probably going to lose the game. So I predicted that the Clippers, Cavs, and Knicks would be the 3 losses. Those were the 3 losses. 2 of them by double figures, 1 of them nearly by double figures with the Clippers loss. But then some nice wins. You had the monster second half comeback against Denver. You had the first 2.5-ish quarters against Dallas, then that disastrous 10-12 minutes, and then the rally in the fourth quarter. The Chicago game where they led wire to wire, and that was, I think, one of their best focused performances of the season. The Washington game, another focused performance in terms of just putting the opponent away. And then tonight, there's some slippage in the fourth quarter. There's some slippage right before halftime, but for the most part, LA was dominating on both sides of the ball, and this was a nice win from just a domination perspective. The Lakers, as we've said before, do not have many blowout wins this season. They don't have a lot of wire-to-wire wins where they keep their foot on their opponent's neck. Tonight was one of those nights. They had another one against Washington, another one against Chicago outside of a few minutes there where Chicago went on that big run to start the third. So some nice wins on this trip from just stacking better habits. We've seen some progress with the defensive side. And that's going to lead me to some of the highlights from the trip, some of the lowlights from the trip. So highlights has to be first and foremost Luka Doncic's performance. Luka just won Western Conference Player of the Month for January, and I think he's been playing at an MVP level over the last 2.5, 3 weeks or so. But particularly on this road trip where I don't have his current averages, but just guessing based on his averages going into tonight, it's going to end up at somewhere around 33 points per game, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, and shot over 50%, shot around 40% on threes, got to the free throw line a bunch, took care of the ball for the most part. So just some great play from Luka. And I think that is the thing to be the most encouraged by right now, is that for the Lakers to hit their ceiling, for the Lakers, regardless of what they do at the trade deadline, whether they make a move, whether they don't make a move, the Lakers hitting their ceiling and having any chance to go on a playoff run was always predicated on Luka being a top 3 player and being able to stand and look across Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, and say, I can match this player or even surpass them. And if he can, then the Lakers have a shot against those teams. If he can't, the Lakers don't have any shot against those teams, right? So I think Luka has to be at least tied for being the best player in the series or the best player in the series in a lot of these series that the Lakers are going to have in the West. And right now he looks like that player. After a rough December, he has bounced back in, rough by his standards. Of course, he was still putting up big numbers, but the efficiency wasn't quite there, the turnovers, etc. He has bounced back in a way where I think he is now firmly in the MVP mix and is going to be jostling, I think, with like Shai continues to be the front runner, but I think he'll be jostling at least right now for the 2 or 3 spot. And then we'll see if the Lakers can go on a run to close the season. I think the second thing for me in terms of highlights was the Lakers defense. And I know it's going to sound a little crazy because they did have some bad defensive stretches for sure on this trip. But I think looking at Toronto game was not a road trip or a part of the road trip technically, but just looking at like what they started to do in that Portland game before the road trip in Portland with the zone, into the Toronto game with the zone, into the Denver game with the trapping, the Clipper game with the second half comeback attempt with the trapping, Dallas with some of the zone, Chicago, Cleveland did not go well, so we're not going to include that one. But Washington tonight against Brooklyn, they went zone a lot. Like they've been really developing their zone into a look that they're more comfortable with defensively. We've also seen them be a bit more aggressive with the trapping, the blitzing, picking up full court sometimes, trapping at half court. And I think there's been mixed results overall. And ultimately, this is just not a good defensive team. And I don't think there's anything that they could do with this personnel to make them a good defensive team. But I have liked JJ changing up some of the pitches, making it a little bit more opponent specific. I talked about, for example, against Portland and Toronto, you can play more zone because they don't have those apex shot creators and playmakers the same way that Denver does, the same way that the Clippers used to until they traded James Harden. But even looking at Cleveland with Donovan Mitchell or New York with Jalen Brunson, those teams and those players can carve you up if you're going to go zone against them. But against a Brooklyn, a Washington, a Chicago, a Toronto, who's needs a little bit more playmaking there next to Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, a Portland, like you can go zone and have some success with the personnel that the Lakers have. So I just think in general, like the defense is never going to be, I don't think they're going to, like, unless they make a big trade, I don't think they're going to be even a league average defense. I think they'll probably stabilize as a below league average defense. But if they can be the 17th best defense or the 19th best defense, that is much more palatable compared to them often being the 24th to 26th best defense for now most of the season. So seeing that trend in the right direction. I also think there's been some highlight, like along those lines. A third thing for me would just be the supporting cast, more so from a defensive perspective, not from an offensive perspective, because we've touched on some of the offensive woes. They were very dependent on Luka and LeBron throughout the course of this trip. But seeing the impact that guys like Jake LaRavia, Marcus Smart, Jared Vanderbilt, Jackson Hayes were able to have defensively at times, and again, executing the zone or some of the schemes that JJ was deploying, I thought that was a sign that, like, I mean, you're going to have to live with those guys having the 4 for 20 shooting performance that they had against the Knicks. But I think things, again, are trending, at least with this current group, in somewhat of the right direction on that end. And then final thing would be LeBron's play, right? And he didn't have, I would say, the same level of offensive production overall, on this trip, but I think he continues to just look more comfortable. Tonight, I thought he had a lot of juice, especially on the offensive end, getting out in transition, getting downhill, creating for his teammates, led the team with 7 assists. So I think LeBron just continues to look, I mean, he earned, was selected to the All-Star team. I think he earned it. And I think he's been playing at an all-star level for the past month and a half or so. So those would be my biggest. And then, I mean, I guess final thing, just to throw in one more highlight would be Austin coming back now and this group being fully whole. Like this was the first time since going on almost 6 weeks since this group has been fully whole. So we'll see how long it lasts and if they can remain healthy based on their recent injury luck. That's just not been in the cards for them. But I think that's a positive too of like Austin was finally able to return after being a couple late scratches, and he made it out of this one okay. In terms of lowlights, I would just say the role player shooting is the first thing that comes to mind, just because the variance with the role players is like, yes, by nature role players are going to have some level of variance, but the Lakers role players are like, some nights they just literally cannot make shots to the point where JJ's in a predicament in terms of who he can play and who he can't. And they're just not like at a competent enough level offensively with most of the supporting cast. So I would say that was a low light in especially like the first 2.5 quarters of the Clippers game, basically the entire Cleveland game, a lot of the New York game. The supporting cast just could not make shots, make plays offensively. And it's funny because you would think that the Lakers would be better defensively based on how offensively challenged a lot of their role players are. And in theory, it's like, well, they're playing all these defensive minded guys, but it hasn't really translated on the defensive end and it hasn't translated on the offensive end. So that just shows some of the limitations in the rotation. And then second thing would just be to sort of go back to my earlier point of the predictability right now with the Lakers and their results. I thought it was a little disappointing that they lost to the 3 best teams on the trip, right? Technically, Denver has a better record than the Clippers, but they were without Jokic. They were without Cam Johnson, without Christian Brown. They had been playing well going into that game, but I think this the version of that the Lakers played of the Clippers, I mean, they've been the best team in the NBA for the past 20 games, best record in the NBA. And I think that team is better than the version of Denver that the Lakers played. So I do think that the Clippers, I mean, you could maybe quibble with Cavs versus Nuggets, right? Because Knicks and Clippers are pretty much at full strength, close to it. Cavs and Nuggets, we can maybe debate that version of the Cavs, no Mobley, no Garland, versus that version of Denver. But it just felt like they lost to the 3 best teams, and 2 of those losses were pretty. You could even argue all 3 losses were rather convincing. Like the Clippers kicked their butt for the first 2.5 quarters. Lakers had a nice 10-12 minute stretch, and then the Clippers out executed them down the stretch. Cavs kicked their butt, especially in the second half, and then Knicks. The game was like relatively close, but Knicks really took over again in the third quarter. So second half woes, third quarter woes would be another thing. But it felt like the Lakers are still lacking in the statement wins department against, like, I want to see them beat a full strength opponent and no possible excuses of any kind, of just like the opponent has everything, has everyone, and it's not second night of a back-to-back, and like the Lakers just beat them, and they have not really had a win like that in a while, I would say. I would not classify any of these wins on, I mean, maybe Toronto, but again, like Toronto, I think, is a worse team than the Lakers. So like they should be beating Toronto. I want to see them beat a team that on paper is better than them and beat them in a rather convincing fashion. But other than that, like, solid trip. Anytime you go above 500 on the road, I think that's a win. So 5-3, I think you take it, and you now come home to Philly, Golden State, OKC, San Antonio. That's a back-to-back, by the way. Dallas, Clippers, Boston, Orlando. That's a pretty tough home slate. None of those teams are, I mean, I guess Dallas is the only bad team that they're playing, but Philly is solid. Golden State has been playing better. OKC is OKC. OKC San Antonio, that's an insane back-to-back for LA. They actually played 5 games before the All-Star break. Then Dallas right before. Clippers are, of course, playing well. We'll see how they fare after the Harden-Garland trade. Boston has been a top 3 team in the East for a while now. Orlando has always given the Lakers some problems with their size and defense and athleticism. So that's a pretty tough 8-game home slate that I think the goal for the Lakers should be at least 5-3, if not 6-2. And that might sound a little low, but based on how they fared against these types of teams, like, I mean, I think they're going to go into the OKC, San Antonio, Clippers, and Boston games as underdogs, despite being at home. I'd be pretty surprised if they're favored in any of those games. Maybe if they can beat OKC or San Antonio, that might change how they're viewed against like the Clippers or Celtics. But Lakers have basically been a 500 team for 2 months, and those teams are all playing much better than them right now. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a tough road trip, tough homestand, but it is a welcome homestand for them to not be in this 10-degree weather out here on the East Coast. In terms of notable performers, I already touched on a little bit of the game, but Luka 24, 6, and 5 set a really good tone early. 8 for 18 shooting, 4 for 11 on threes. Not his most efficient performance. Also had 5 turnovers, which is high for him based on how well he's been taking care of the ball recently. But I thought the passing was great tonight. I thought he set the tone early with, I believe he had 14, if I'm not mistaken, 14 or 16 in the first quarter, helped the Lakers establish an early offensive rhythm and get out to, I mean, they scored 45 in the first quarter. It was maybe their best offensive quarter, like probably their best offensive quarter of the season, even factoring in the opponent. 45 points, shot 15 of 18, 83%. That's just an unfathomable percentage. Like that's ridiculous for a quarter. LeBron, I mentioned it, had a lot of juice tonight, 25 points, 7 assists, got a standing ovation from the Lakers fans as he checked out. But 10 for 16, didn't hit his threes, but got to the free throw line 7 times and had 3 steals. I thought did a nice job playing some of the passing lanes. Jake LaRavia, 18 points, 5 rebounds, 7 for 9 shooting. It did a really good job with cutting and posting up against mismatches, smaller guards, and getting some offensive rebounds. Had 1 offensive rebound, but getting out in transition. Like I just thought it was a nice offensive performance from Jake. Marcus Smart had a couple of nice off the dribble finishes. Was vacillating between being point of attack and also guarding Michael Porter Jr. Thought he had a solid game. I thought DA was fine tonight, 7 points, 8 rebounds, and had a steal. And I had 3 assists. I thought there was some nice playmaking out of him in the short roll. Gabe, I will note, did make a shot, but and was outside of Rui pretty much the only. Yeah, outside of Rui, Gabe and Rui were the 2 rotation players who had negative plus minuses tonight. Everyone else was a positive among the actual like rotation, 10-man rotation. But Gabe, I will note that I thought he had some nice, like he had a steal, he had some nice fronts and deflections when switched on to bigger players. So I thought he competed on the defensive side, but I think in general, the Lakers need more from him on both ends of the ball, and that is the clear spot in the rotation outside of Maxey to upgrade. Jackson Hayes had some great finishes in the pick and roll, transition, offensive rebounds. He was outplaying Nic Claxton and Day'Ron Sharpe for some stretches of this game. Rui hit his first 3. I thought struggled defensively against Michael Porter Jr., who got by him several times, but I mean, again, I don't want to take away too much from this. Vando, I thought came in and made an impact, had some nice passing, had a nice cut for a layup. I think that was off of that was actually a Jackson assist. I was going to say it was a DA assist. And then Austin, I'm going to save his analysis for one of my takeaways, but 15 points, 4 rebounds. 1 assist, should have been 2 with the off the backboard pass and a couple steals, 3 for 9 shooting. 1 for 5 on threes, 8 for 10 at the free throw line. In terms of stat of the night, I'm going to go with 31 fast break points, which I believe is a season high. I've been trying to confirm that, have not. Basketball, I don't know why Basketball Reference doesn't have that more easily accessible, but I believe 31 points is the Lakers' season high in fast break points or thereabouts. And this was a transition fest for LA with the steals. They had 14 steals. Every rotation player except for, except for Vando, which is ironic because he obviously is so great at playing passing lanes and being disruptive around the top of the arc. But 9 of the 10 rotation players had at least one steal. Austin had a couple. LeBron had 3. So the defensive activity and engagement. I mean, this Nets team, they're going to be rebuilding for a while. I don't see. I don't know how many of these guys are going to end up being like rotation level players on like a good team in the future, let alone there's a couple starters in here. I think MPJ and Nic Claxton are the starters, but everybody else, it's a bit rough. And I know they have a lot of rookies, of course, but it was not a high level execution game from the Nets. In terms of takeaway number 1, we have to touch on Austin Reaves. So Austin Reaves returns. JJ Redick had said before the road trip, Austin was going to return at some point on the trip. He had suggested it was going to be last week. Didn't end up happening. He was a late scratch for both the Washington and New York games. Ends up going through pregame warm-up tonight, and calf felt good. Ends up getting cleared. And I thought Austin, for missing 19 games and missing almost 6 weeks, did solid tonight. Again, 15 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist that should have been 2, couple steals. A little bit rusty on the jumper, right? Just went 1 for 5 on threes, so was 2 for 4 inside the arc, but got to the free throw line 10 times, led the team, and I thought his downhill force and pressure was something that they really missed. And there was a visible difference to me in having Austin handle the ball compared to Marcus Smart, Gabe Vincent, or even going down the list to like a Nick Smith or Kobe Buffkin. Like, you just saw like, oh yeah, he's their second best ball handler behind Luka, third best passer overall, but like they missed that piece. He's such a big piece of the offense. And I thought he progressively looked more comfortable, and he started to bust out some of the highlights with the passing and the dribbling and the getting downhill. So as I've said with several guys, we talked about this with LeBron returning. We talked about this with Rui returning. We talked about this with Luka returning. I think guys need a level of grace to have a couple, at least 2-3 games under their belt before we start really analyzing them back to the level that they were at previously. Austin, of course, was not at his typical level tonight, only played 20 minutes, but he was on a minutes restriction. I thought there was some good things, and he made a positive impact that clear. Like, Lakers also played a lot of zone with him out there. I thought it was interesting. They went to him a little bit in the group. Like, JJ's changed the rotation to have Rui in place of Drew Timme with that second unit group, and now he put Austin in there instead of Marcus. So it was Austin, Rui, LeBron, Vando, DeAndre Ayton, and they're playing that 2-3 zone, which I think Austin can be a part of as, one of the top 2 guards in that. But yeah, I mean, it was good to get Austin back. He looked like Austin. He had the highlight of the night with the off the backboard pass to LeBron, and I think it's going to be a couple games until he's fully back. He did come off the bench. It's worth noting. One funny thing. So the Lakers close the first half. The Lakers are up, I believe, by 39 in the first half at one point. And then JJ, I don't know if it was to torture me specifically, to torture part of the fan base, but he goes to the OG starters for the final 2:37 of the first half, and they get outscored 7-0. And I'm like, this group just cannot succeed together. They came into the game with a -20 net rating, and they get outscored 7-0 by the Nets. It wasn't even their starting group. It was, mix of bench and starters. And you're seeing defensively, there's like, Zaire Williams gets out in transition. I think Luka was upset about a call. He was complaining at the refs. DA is trotting back in transition. I will note DA's transition defense I didn't love tonight. But like those two guys barely are crossing half court. Nets have all 5 guys. It's 5-on-3. They score in transition. Then there's another play where MPJ creates a good look. Day'Ron Sharpe. There's actually a lot of DA in this, right? And he's not been playing well overall lately. He allows an offensive rebound from Day'Ron Sharpe that he kicks it out. And then Yegor cashes in a 3, I believe. And then another play where I think they're going zone, if I'm not, they're either going zone or it looked zone on the possession, because I went back and rewatched the possessions, and MPJ just blows by Rui and ends up going in for a layup. So it's like that group, and then offensively it's stagnant. It's Luka, you're dribbling the ball, ISO ball. It's then LeBron post up ISO ball, and they're not moving. And like, I just think we need to retire that group. That group has not played well all season, and they're playing one of the worst teams in the league, and they get their butts kicked for that 2.5 minutes. And it was just like, all right, we don't need to see that anymore. But then JJ opens the second half with what I think I and many believe should be the starting group, which was Ayton, LeBron, Smart, Austin, and Luka. And that group immediately goes on a 6-0 run. They outscore Brooklyn 18-12 overall. They take their foot off the gas a little bit. We know Lakers don't always play the hardest when they have a lead. They do get outscored overall in the third quarter, but that group was a +6 in 6.5 minutes. And I'm not saying that's like an earth-shattering number, especially against this caliber of opponent, but the alternative was a -7 in 2.5 minutes. And I think it would have been worse if that stretch had continued. So I just think we need to retire that group, punt it into the ether, never see it again, and go with the new starting lineup. JJ was asked about it after the game, and was asked if that was a signal of what he's going to do with the starters, and he said there's no signal there. So we'll see what that means. Then takeaway number 2, quickly wanted to touch on Nic Claxton and Day'Ron Sharpe. We could even touch on Zaire Williams a little bit too. But Nic Claxton, so I have not done a trade targets episode yet, just because it is looking like the Lakers are probably going to do nothing and or just make a really small move and keep the powder dry for the potential of Giannis or another big player or a couple of starting level players in the offseason when they'll have the 2 picks. They can technically draft on behalf of someone with the 2026 pick, and they'll have a bunch of cap space depending on what they do with their player salaries. So that's the way that things are trending right now on the Lakers front. I think they'd have to be blown away with an opportunity in terms of like, does New Orleans drop the asking price on Herb Jones? It seems like Cleveland now is probably set, but they are trying to position themselves for Giannis. So if that doesn't come to fruition for them, like what's the status with Jared Allen? I think there are some guys out there that would be clearly worth the first, and LA pivoting with their plans, but it doesn't seem like that's the way that this is going to play out. So through that lens, I think Nic Claxton is actually in the group of guys that could be had for a first, and is someone I still remain high on. He did not have a great audition tonight. It continues to be a trend of Lakers potential trade targets wetting the bed against them in these matchups. We've talked about it with Herb Jones, Jeremy Grant for the past couple of years, and on with some of the other guys. Like, just some of these guys, for whatever reason, have not fared well against LA. And this was an opportunity for Nic Claxton to make a lasting impression, because the next time the Lakers play will be after the trade deadline. So this could have been the final impression going into the deadline. 10 points, 5 rebounds, didn't have a steal or block. I think one thing with Nick that doesn't get talked about enough is his feel for the game. So he had a couple of really nice assists where, he's not like Jokic or Şengün or Sabonis or even Hartenstein, right? So I'm not trying to paint him through that lens, but I do think he's got some passing chops, and both of his assists were around the elbow to 3-point line extended and hitting cutters with bullet passes that I don't think, for example, DeAndre Ayton or Jackson Hayes could make. So I think there is a level of passing and feel for the game offensively, to say nothing of his ball handling. Like, he's a guy who he can take it coast to coast. He's got that green light. They run a lot of dribble handoffs for him, and he is a very dependent player. So just like I think if you put Jackson Hayes on this team instead of Nic Claxton, he would have similar struggles in terms of getting high percentage looks around the basket. Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, even DeAndre Ayton. Like, I think if you are a dependent big man on your playmakers setting you up, this Brooklyn team is just not the right situation for you. So a lot of Claxton's buckets were actually self-creation of him catching in the elbow area or catching in the middle of the paint, flashing into a post up into a quick hook. He had one nice drive, but I don't want to judge him. I don't want to judge him based on one game. I've said that I think that's where GMs can often make a mistake in like the sense of overvaluing a player's performance against them in like a positive way, where if a player kills you, all of a sudden you want to trade for that player, you want to sign that player. I think the inverse is true, where if a player doesn't have the best game against you, you have to look at the totality of the season, the context, what they've done in their career. And so I'm still firmly on board with Nic Claxton. I think if he is available for the Lakers, that is someone I would be interested in. And you saw, like, even the first possession that the Lakers scored on, that Luka teardrop fadeaway, that was a tough shot, and that was great defense from Nic Claxton. And even Luka, like, running back, was kind of like proud of himself and making some faces. It was a credible shot from Luka, of course, but Nick can switch on. Like, he switched on to Luka, he switched on to Austin, he switched on to LeBron. I think there's a level of defensive versatility there that I do think you have to be careful with what type of front court you build with him. And ideally, you have a bigger, more physical four. This player just got traded, but he'd be great with like a Jaren Jackson Jr. And I think that as like a 4-5 combo. But I mentioned Aaron Gordon, Peyton Watson. I think it depends on who the other front court player is. I mean, theoretically, I guess that would be Luka, because Luka's a front court defender. But I think with a certain build, Nic Claxton makes sense. And frankly, it seems like Utah is going to keep Walker Kessler. That's been some of the buzz that has been out there. And if that is the case, there aren't that many center options, right? It's like Isaiah Hartenstein could be available. He could also not be available. Jared Allen might not be available. Walker Kessler obviously could not be available. You get down the list and it's like all this, like there's not that many great potential targets for LA. So I do think there's a notable gap between Nic Claxton and DeAndre Ayton. And I think if he was a Laker and used as like a supercharged Jackson Hayes, I think like you could switch 1 through 5 with him. I think he has a certain motor. He has a certain skill set that, especially like the short roll playmaking, that is something that DA has gotten better at, but it's still not a strength of his. I think that's a strength of Claxton's. I think Claxton would have plenty of opportunities to, slip screens, ghost screens, and get into 4-on-3 situations. And if the defense is going to play off of him, he can just drive down the teeth of the defense and dunk on someone or draw a foul. So I think he would be unlocked. Like, you need a certain skill set to fit with Luka to fully click with him. I think Claxton is on the short list of guys who are a true lob threat, but can also do a little bit more in the pick and roll. So to say nothing of the defensive side of the ball, where he's one of the most versatile bigs. Like, yes, the rebounding and the strength, the brawn, the power, that is a concern, and that's undeniable, and that is something you have to game plan for. But it's really difficult to find, like, okay, you could go get a Steven Adams, right, who's obviously injured anyway, but then he's not that good of a rim protector. There's some mobility issues with Steven Adams. He's a much better rebounder. He's stronger, right? But he's more of a backup. So Mitchell Robinson, same thing, more of a backup, also a bit injury prone. So like you're not going to find a big man who checks every single box, but I do think Claxton checks a lot of boxes. With all that said, the best big man in this game tonight was Day'Ron Sharpe, who had 19 points, 14 rebounds, 10 offensive rebounds, 3 steals, and continues to be one of my favorite, I would say, realistic lower end targets. I think this is someone that if you put a second round pick on the table, Brooklyn would at least have to consider that. If it's some basis of Dalton in a second, I think that's at least gets a conversation on the Brooklyn side. I'm not saying they would do it necessarily, but Day'Ron is, if Claxton is a little bit more of the athletic, finesse, rangy type of big man, Day'Ron is strong, brute force, and with underrated mobility for his size. I thought did a nice job playing passing lanes and just. You see like the motor really stands out with him at a level that is, I think, right there with a guy like a Vando or a Marcus, right? He is cut from the Banshee cloth, so to speak. So he is someone that I is relatively limited from he's only really going to score around the basket. I know he's like developed a little bit of a jumper, but I don't know how much you would fully trust that with him. I think there are some defensive mobility issues that probably make him more of a backup than a starter, but I would just almost like him as a change of pace or change of pitch defensively, and just from a physicality perspective, where if you had DA, Hayes, and Sharpe, it is a loaded center spot in terms of like there's 3 guys who you can make an argument for playing, but if DA struggles, now you have 2 alternatives, and you could, if he continues to struggle in the big games and against the best teams, you could just ultimately phase him out and at some point be going Jackson, Day'Ron, and small ball, right? And then if there's a matchup where DA is not really bringing it motor wise, maybe Jackson's a little bit too thin. Like if it's Jokic, I like Day'Ron Sharpe maybe the best out of those 3, or at least maybe the best against Jonas Valanciunas in the bench minutes, right? So I think you need different looks, and right now the one look the Lakers are sort of lacking at the 5 spot, I think, is the power big, because you can make a case DeAndre Ayton can be that occasionally. I don't think he's that consistently, and I don't want to rely on that, as that being his primary archetype. Then Zaire Williams, I thought he had a pretty good audition as well, 17 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists. I think the big thing with him is that he's been a below average 3-point shooter his entire career, and he has improved defensively. He is rated out as around average to actually slightly above average the last couple of years defensively, depending on the metric, but it is a bit of a range of like slightly below average to slightly above average. I would say I would label him as like a slight plus on the defensive side, but I just think the offensive limitations, like he's not Vando, right? But I do think he's got the length, the fluidity to attack on the weak side, and he shot the ball well tonight, 3 for 6. But again, he's been a below average shooter for the entirety of his career. I just think that it's worth, like, if you can get him, if you're the Lakers, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it. I don't think he's like the panacea for them in terms of, I don't think he would start. I think he'd be kind of right there, maybe in a similar range to Vando in terms of overall role. And then third and final takeaway, we have a lot of developments on the trade market. I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing anything. And please let me know if anything breaks while we're going. But so some of the developments, there's the James Harden trade, the Triple J trade. The Harden one, my understanding is that's primarily about money and his future, and the Clippers didn't really want to pay him beyond next season. He wants a new contract. He wants more financial stability. He also wants to compete more. So, another situation where James Harden asks out. I'm not the biggest Harden guy, and I do think he's got a complicated legacy. I think this only adds to it, where when you've asked out now 5, I don't know if I consider the OKC one and asking out, because that was more, they didn't offer, like they could have paid him a little bit more. They ultimately decided not to, and then he bolted. But like 4 of these times he has asked out in a way that, we could go through the fat suit and all the different ways that he has asked out. But it does, I think, add this wrinkle to his legacy where, despite, I think, having a certain level of longevity that some of his other, like, you compare him to Russ, and it's like Harden was one of the all-star snubs this year, right? Like he has maintained a level of play that some of his counterparts in the same generation have not been able to. I mentioned Russ. You could look at DeMar DeRozan. Blake Griffin's been out of the league for a couple of years, and obviously wasn't the same player the last few years of his career. So you look at that like 09 draft class. Steph is the exception, right? But Harden has still maintained an elite level. It's just, there's the playoff history, and then there's also, he's just never happy and constantly asking out. Then I think Garland's a good get for the Clippers. I'm surprised they got a 2nd-round pick out of all this, but you get 10 years younger. I think Harden right now is a better player, and Garland's got to stay healthy. But I think longer term, it's a solid move for the Clippers. Utah and Memphis, it was time for Memphis to tear it down. I'm glad they finally did that. They got 7 first-round picks between Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. Now have 13 picks over the next 7 years. They are set up. It's going to be a multi-year rebuild, but they are set up to be, I think, looking pretty good in like 2029, 2030. We'll see. And then Utah going for it with Triple J. I thought it was a little bit of a steep price, especially based on the picks that they're giving up, which is probably going to be their own pick. And then also that 2031 Suns pick, which could be really valuable. But I respect them. I commend them for going for it, actually. And a lot of rebuilding teams try to slow drip the process of actually, and it's been a few years in Utah, so it's not like they are expediting this overnight, but they have been rebuilding and tanking for multiple years. I think it was time to see what they could do with a little bit more of a competitive roster. I also think people aren't focusing as much on like Jock Landale and Vince Williams and John Conchar, but like those are solid back end rotation guys that I think give Utah better depth, and they're a team to me that should be a real contender to be a play-in team next year. I think probably like the 9 or 10 seed, but progress from where they are right now. And then on the Lakers front, I mentioned it at the top, but there was a report from Mark Stein that the Lakers are likely going to be, or that the Lakers feel, and that there's a sense out there that if Giannis is not traded by the trade deadline, that the Lakers will emerge as a serious threat for Giannis. The basis of that is that the Lakers can, depending on how much cap space they clear, acquire Giannis without sending anything back. They can acquire him into their cap space, send out the 2 picks plus draft. You could actually agree to the deal before or on draft day with the 3 picks, and then draft on behalf of Milwaukee. And then the second free agency starts, that's when you send the player over. So I would say it really depends on what the offers are. I think if I'm Milwaukee, I still would prefer. And then, you get the trade exception, and then you could do other things, like they could take on other money and get more picks from other teams. And maybe it does technically expand to them taking on a player from another team. But you look at the Lakers picks that they netted plus picks from another team, it could end up being like 4 or 5 first-round picks potentially. I would just say that it does feel a little pie in the sky to me. I think it like we have not heard Giannis express that he wants to be a Laker. There was the Shams report over the beginning of the season from the summer that he wanted to go to New York. There's been the recent reporting that Miami and Milwaukee are the 2 teams he's been interested in. He has not been tied to the Lakers yet, so I think that has to be somewhat of a consideration in terms of, I think if the Lakers can offer the picks, there will be some interest, but can they actually leapfrog some of these teams to being the primary team is an entirely different question. And then also, I just think if I'm Milwaukee, I need a blue chip player back for Giannis, because the picks are great and thinking about what the picks can be, but I need something tangible. I need to be able to go back to my fan base and be like, we got player X. Like, this is not going to happen, but if you got Amen Thompson and 2 first-round picks, that to me would trump basically anything the Lakers can offer. And I don't think Amen Thompson's on the table. I don't think Houston's going to do that, nor do I think Houston should do that. But like that's an example of, or San Antonio, right? And San Antonio hasn't shown interest. So again, this is just a hypothetical. But if you could walk away with an Amen Thompson, an Alperen Şengün, Stephon Castle, Dylan Harper, that's like the type of blue chip piece I need, plus multiple picks. Just offering multiple picks and cap flexibility, you still ultimately need to get the players, right? And this is like the one chance I think Milwaukee has to get a blue chip player outside of the draft, but there's no guarantees in the draft that you're going to have a top 10 pick, have a top 5 pick, that you're going to nail that pick. Like there's a lot of unknowns with that. I know what Amen Thompson can be. I know it, and I'm just referencing those names as like examples, but there's different, depending on the situation that I would, if I'm Milwaukee, I would love a Jaden McDaniels. I know he's maybe like a little bit above some of those other guys in terms of age, but like that is someone who I think has showed a lot of growth in Minnesota. So I think it comes down to what the ultimate packages are and what the young talent is. But I feel like if I'm Milwaukee, I need that type of player. Then there's another report. There've been a couple other reports. I mean, Brian Windhorst reported that the Lakers, he's hearing they are not putting any of their picks on the table and that they're only offering the expirings, and that even the second round pick, they don't want to trade. Then there's also a report from Brad Turner. This one got a chuckle from some people on social media that the Lakers are trying to trade Gabe Vincent and Dalton Knecht, and no one seems to be interested in acquiring either Gabe Vincent or Dalton Knecht. So those are, all that's along the lines I've been hearing. I continue to hear that the Lakers really want or really believe they have a shot at Giannis and or making big moves, whether it's another star that maybe there's an early playoff exit, they could go get another star, or teams have to make certain decisions on, like maybe they could be the third team in a Giannis trade, or maybe they could just go get another starting level player with the picks that they have and the cap flexibility, because in the new apron era, teams are going to have to get off money. So that seems to be a very optimistic view from them. And you guys know how I feel about this. I believe there should be 2 objectives for the Lakers at the 2026 trade deadline. Objective number 1 is acquiring a long-term starter next to Luka Doncic and Austin Reaves, likely a front court starter, but be it a center or a 3-and-D wing. I think it would be great to nab one of those players for the long run and the long term, and that type of player that could fit with those guys both in the now and the future. I think that would be a success of a deadline, right? The Lakers have a lot of needs. I don't see a realistic move or even couple moves that addresses all of them. But if they could walk away from this deadline with the center of the future or the 3-and-D wing of the future, I think that would constitute a success. But if they don't do that, the second thing for me is then you need to upgrade the Gabe Vincent, Maxi Kleber, Dalton Knecht spots in the rotation. You need to trade at least 2, if not all 3 of those guys, and flip it for maybe a higher salary player that's an expiring, or just a couple of better players, better fitting players, whatever it may be. But I think at a minimum, the Lakers need to do a small move. And if they just stand pat entirely and don't do anything, that's putting so much risk on the 2026 offseason and nailing that, as I've talked about, where if you don't nail that, it's a failure. And it is a disaster start to the Luka tenure of, if you just end up running this back, potentially without LeBron, or even if you add, again, I made this point before, even if you just lose LeBron and like even get Peyton Watson. I like Peyton Watson, and we're talking about in the summer here, but like that is not on the same level as OKC or Denver or San Antonio. Like they still have steps to go. This is not a fully formed roster. So they have several moves to make. They have several players to acquire. And I think it'd be smart to acquire that player or at least one of those players now, and then continue to acquire those players in the offseason. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from MuselK420. LA can't put all the chips on Luka being the best player in the series despite having a sorry team. It's a team sport, best team wins series always. That's fair. And we saw that in the Minnesota series. I think Luka's performance was discounted a bit, and even his numbers, like he still averaged 30 plus for the series, but his numbers were thrown off by the game 3 sickness and him gutting that one out. You look at games 1, 2, 4, and 5, and his numbers are even better and more in line with what we expect from him. I don't think he was the best player in the series. Ultimately, I think it was probably Ant. I would give Ant a slight edge. I felt like he made every big shot, every big play that the Timberwolves needed down the stretch. But to that point, you could make the case, you could argue whether Luka was the best player or not in that series. But even if he was, then you go to the rest of the roster, the rest of the group, and it went very heavy toward the Minnesota side. I think this has been the issue for the Lakers. We saw this in the New York game where I thought Luka and LeBron, if we're comparing like Luka versus Jalen Brunson, Luka had the better game. LeBron versus Cat, I believe LeBron had the better game. You go to spot 3 in the rotation. I don't even know who that would be. I don't know, Marcus Smart versus OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby had the better game. Jake LaRavia versus Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges had the better game. DA versus Mitchell Robinson. I thought Mitchell Robinson outplayed him. Like you just go down the list and it was like New York won every single head-to-head matchup basically. And that's been an issue for the Lakers. It was an issue in the first round last year. It's been an issue against most of the good teams. Is just their 3 through 9 or 4 through 9 once Austin's back, 4 through 10, whatever you want to say, is just straight up better. And that's something that I don't see how the Lakers really address that outside of making a move now and then making more moves in the summer. But you got to start now because this 4 through 10 is not, I don't think it's a championship level 4 through 10, to be completely honest about it. And I don't think you can just rely on, like, I think Luka can do it for a series probably. Like he is that special. He is that great where they can be a road underdog and Luka can dominate the way we've seen him dominate in the playoffs before. But to do it 2 series, 3 series, 4 series, I just think that's too tall of an ask. And especially with the modern NBA and how the game is played and just how the game is shifted, I do think you need that like top 9 or 10 to be really solid. And we saw that last postseason. Depth really mattered due to injuries or foul trouble or just style of play. You needed to rely on your 8, 9, and 10 guys at some point, unless you're the Lakers in game 4. But even then, them not being able to rely on those guys ultimately was a death knell for them in the series. So yeah, I agree with you. Music Hill 420 again. Thank you for super chat. Since LA is not going to do any major trades to improve, Rob should ask LBJ to waive his no trade clause and trade him and AR and get some assets. Use those in the summer. I will continue to push back on the trading of AR. You are not trading him at the peak of his value. The peak of AR's value will be next season when he has re-signed and the team that potentially, let's just go through the hypothetical of you trade him. That team's either going to be getting him for 4 or 5 years because he's going to be locked up. So trading Austin now, he's a flight risk. He's an expiring contract with no allegiance to the new situation. If you trade multiple first round picks potentially to the Lakers for Austin Reaves and he walks, that is a disastrous outcome for your franchise that unless you back channel it somehow and get assurance from him, which I don't believe you would get, and I don't believe would happen, it's just not realistic. And so I would actually say I would say, as crazy as it sounds, because LeBron has the no trade clause, I think trading Austin is even less likely than trading LeBron, because the Lakers would be trading Austin at a low in terms of his value because of the uncertainty with his future. LeBron is in control of his future to a degree, but there was the ESPN report from Dave McMenamin that LeBron's going to be with the Lakers through the deadline. And that's not a surprise, right? I didn't think LeBron was going to be traded. the part of this is like you would need LeBron to sign off on being traded, and Cleveland can't trade for him. That ship has sailed. And I just don't know what the situation is. Like, it's hard to trade that amount of money. Also factoring in the Lakers situation where they're 1.1 or so million under the first apron. I just don't see LeBron or Austin being traded. But yeah, I mean, I would honestly say though, like LeBron, at least there's the value of like potentially his final season or having him for next season, which would theoretically be his final season if you're the team acquiring him. With Austin, there's no assurance at all. And like LeBron would have to sign off on it. So LeBron, I believe, would only sign off on a situation where he wanted to go to, right? Like he's not going to just go to New Orleans or something, right? Like he's going to go to a good team where he wants to be. Austin might be able to tell the Lakers some say in terms of where he gets traded, but like Austin could just dip, and that is not a smart. Like, think about the inverse of if the Lakers traded 3 firsts for a guy and he walked in the summer, Lakers fans would be protesting outside Crypto.com Arena, being upset with the team for that trade. So no team's going to do that. That does not make any sense. And I'm not picking on you. I know there's this sense out there that they should trade Austin, and I continue to say it does not make sense, and you'd be surprised at how low the return would be if they actually tried to trade Austin. Tiger Woods, what up, Tiger? Thank you for the super chat. Defense isn't good enough this year. Chalk it up as a first round exit and shoot for a star this summer. Do you think Giannis is enough next year to contend, or use Cap for well-rounded starting 5? I agree with the first part of this. I think that they are currently looking like a first round exit. I think the top 5 teams in the West would be at least like 55% favorites against them. And now there's some interesting nuance within it, right? Because I think OKC and Denver would both be heavy favorites over them. San Antonio and Houston haven't yet to win a playoff series together as young cores. So there's some uncertainty as to like how they would fare on the playoff stage. Then Minnesota has been to back-to-back conference finals, but I mean, what if they get Giannis, right? And blow up their core, blow up their team. So you don't know where Minnesota is going to be necessarily. But yeah, I mean, I would say as things are trending, like they look like probably the 6th best team in the West, which means they're probably going to lose in round 1. Although again, maybe they're able to beat San Antonio on the road or Houston on the road, go to round 2, and then I think probably lose to Denver. Giannis, well, it depends on the framework of everything. If it's Luka, Giannis, and Austin, I think that's, of course, a great big 3 that it's not. I think there's some issues with usage similar to having LeBron there, right? Like you're now replacing LeBron with Giannis. Giannis is a much better player at this stage of his career, but there's still sort of he needs the ball, Luka needs the ball, Austin needs the ball. You got to navigate that. You got to stagger those guys. I don't think it's the absolute cleanest fit with Luka and Giannis. You're going to need Luka to play off the ball even more than he has right now. And you're going to need Giannis to screen and roll more than he has or has wanted to in Milwaukee. So you're going to need both those guys to make some changes to their games. I honestly would probably prefer the well-rounded starting 5. Again, it depends on like how you can build out the roster, but to be honest, like I just think about the last time the Lakers had 3 stars or traded for a 3rd star with Russ, and how they filled out the roster that year, and even how they filled out the roster the following year. And I just think when you have a 3-star build, you really have to nail. You're going to get like one exception player, and then the rest are going to be all minimums, and you have to nail all those. And I do think there's a bit of a concerning track record with the front office in terms of not identifying the right type of talent to complement the stars. So I would be concerned that even if they did land, I mean, I said this on Lakers Collective, even if they do land Giannis, do you have the utmost confidence that they could put the right pieces around Giannis, Luka, and Austin. And I think it's fair to question that. I think it's fair to question, could they find the right five? Could they find the right wing? Could they find the right bench? I don't know. But like looking at the last few years, how they've assessed and evaluated and executed some of those tasks doesn't give me a lot of confidence. So I think I would prefer the well-rounded starting five, assuming it's actually a well-rounded starting five. So this is where we get into the, like, it has to be the right five. It has to be the right three. It has to be the right four. That's easier said than done. So if it is like, if they're basically running it back in terms of you're going to sign a DeAndre Ayton type, a Jake LaRavia type, a Marcus Smart type, and like do like bargain bin hunting for the starters, then I would prefer Giannis and just like roll the dice with the star power. If you can actually go out and acquire those high level starting players, I think I'd prefer a more well-rounded team, assuming that they complement Luka, of course. Musical K420 says, thank you for the super chat. LA should tank, get a higher pick in the draft. Can't be mediocre in NBA, be good or tank. Roster needs 3 to 4 moves to compete on a high level. They're not going to tank, and you can't sell Luka on a tank. Luka would not go for that. Luka wants to win, and I think at least based on Luka's public comments, he has sounded more optimistic on the roster than I think you would assume. I also think Luka's not the type to throw people under the bus or take shots, make passive aggressive remarks. So you're not going to get that from him when you ask him about the roster or the deadline or whatnot. But I think right now the Lakers need to keep Luka happy, and tanking would not keep Luka happy. Like I think that's even more important than basically anything else right now. Is you're still in a honeymoon phase to a degree with Luka, where you do not want to rock that, because I think if you turn around and start taking, I think there could be a trade demand this summer if you're not careful. So you don't want to mess with the rest of the season with Luka. Then Musical follows it up. If nothing happens in the summer, 77 should ask for a trade. I think we're a ways away from that, but certainly there's a lot of pressure on the Lakers front office. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Do you think the front office sees fan frustration or not? Fans aside, if they can't build around Luka, national media will be on them, would be my guess. About to crash out Jovan. Also give Bronny Gabe's playing time. There's a long list of players I'd want to give Gabe's playing time to, including Nick Smith Jr. and Kobe Buffkin, who I do not understand the way that they handled that 10-day contract. Yes, I'm aware. My understanding is that they are aware. That there was someone doxed Rob Pelinka's address, which is just absolutely insane behavior. Like I know people are frustrated with the front office. I know people are frustrated with him, but like there's lines that you just don't cross, and posting that and making threats and stuff like that. That's beyond the line, right? I know people will make jokes that they're going to crash out or they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And like, sometimes it's funny, but like there is a line you don't cross in terms of actually making certain threats. And I know they are aware of that situation and that happened. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're like fully aware to the extent that the fan base is upset. Like, again, I posted a social clip from my last stream, and I literally say in the video, I think the Lakers are probably going to lose in round 1, and that if they don't nail the offseason, it's a failure, a mismanagement, and a complete disaster to the start of the Luka era. And somehow, despite me saying all of that, people are saying I was caping for the front office and like defending them as if that's my MO or something. So I think there's just a lot of frustration with the fan base. And basically, if you're not saying that they should be fired or, just torn down, that the fan base is upset. So they're aware. I think there is an element, though, when we look at some of the recent ways they've handled these situations, is like, I think sometimes they feel like they have a better sense of what the best path is. And that if they do land a Giannis or they do land a couple of high level starters, that fans will appreciate that. Like the bigger picture will be the fans will appreciate the patience that they showed and that they held on to their assets. But again, you have to go actually do that. Then you can't, like, they're really setting up a high stakes offseason, right? Where if Giannis gets traded on Thursday already, that's going to force a pivot from them. Then if he doesn't, but then he still gets traded elsewhere, that's going to eventually force a pivot. And then you got Peyton Watson could re-sign as a restricted free agent, Walker Kessler, on and on. Like there's no guarantee you get any of these guys. So it's going to be like Isaiah Hartenstein, Lou Dort, those guys. OKC's gonna have to make a decision, but it's also like if Isaiah Hartenstein or Lou Dort becomes available, there's going to be multiple suitors. It's not just going to be, oh, the Lakers, here's a first round pick, OKC, give us your player. It's going to be, no, there's going to be competition. There's going to be a high asking price. And if I'm OKC, I'm trying to not trade those guys to a top contender in the West. I'm looking East or I'm looking at the bottom of the conference. I'm not looking to the Lakers, the Nuggets, the Rockets, the Spurs. I would not trade them there. So the Lakers, like, even some of the fantasies of what could potentially be available, I think are potentially just that, a fantasy. So we'll see. Salih, is that Salih Alexander? I hope I didn't butcher that too hard. Thank you for the super chat. I've been saying it for 2 years, get Day'Ron Sharpe. I'm with you. I am with you. I thought they should have got him last year in the DFS trade. I heard they didn't even ask about him. They didn't even inquire about him in that trade discussion with the Nets for DFS. So for whatever reason, he's not been a player that they have targeted, but I think he would be a great fit off the bench as a bench big. Chuck Dangler, a.k.a. Fang Charlie. Thank you for the super chat. Sup, man. Finally, we get to see the Lakers go home. AR played good for his return today. Waiting for an email reply. Brought a safe flight back to LA. Yes, Austin played well tonight. And I do owe you an email. I appreciate the well wishes. Wannabe GM's podcast. Thank you for the super chat. Kleba plus second plus connect for Highsmith and Zaire. So I would do this. I don't know that it's enough for the Nets, and I've seen some people highlighting that the Timberwolves are able to dump Mike Conley and being like, why can't the Lakers do that? One big piece of the Timberwolves being able to dump Mike Conley specifically to Chicago, well, Chicago got Jaden Ivey in that deal. So that was, I actually think, I didn't really talk about that one. I don't love that one for Detroit. I feel like Detroit sold low on Jaden Ivey and Kevin Huerter. To me, I think Luke Kennard and Kevin Huerter are both, they're like they're good shooters who don't do a lot else. And I think are like, have a little bit of ball handling, passing chops, but I think are defensive liabilities who can be targeted, and they exist more in theory for their teams than they do in reality in terms of their ultimate role. So I get that Detroit needed shooting. It feels like that's just a player who I don't know his playoff viability at like the highest levels of Eastern Conference Finals or Finals potentially. So I felt like they sold low on Jaden Ivey personally. But a big reason why Mike Conley was able to be dumped to Chicago, but Chicago got Jaden Ivey as the cost of doing business, which is way more valuable than anything the Lakers are offering here. Now, it's apples to oranges to a degree, but I think the Lakers right now are really struggling with dumping some of these guys. And, I think you could argue the Nets are giving up the two best assets in this entire deal. So I believe Highsmith has got a year left on his contract. Let's see. Yes, he No, why is this not pop? Here we go. Or is Highsmith is expiring at 5.6. And then Zaire is 6.3, then has 6.3 club option next year. And then Dalton has, I believe, like 4 million on the books next year. So I guess Nets save a couple million. And then Kleba versus I mean, yeah, I to be honest, I don't think this would be enough from the Brooklyn side, but maybe I'm wrong. Arno DeCapo, thank you for the super chat. Can't wait till Blinken and Genie are out. They're milking the Giannis situation to do nothing. We will be back next year with a similar style team. I understand the skepticism. I understand the frustration. To be honest, I feel for the fans. I do. Because I have had similar critiques, and I go back to the 2024 deadline where they stood pat, and the messaging, I mean, it's been going viral again on X. The messaging was the Lakers will stand pat at the trade deadline and, enter the offseason with 3 tradable first round picks. It was the same situation, mind you, where technically they had the first round pick that they were going to draft, which ended up being Dalton. So it was actually more so a player that they had to pick in the draft, and then 2 additional first round picks from there. Because there is a difference. I will continue to note there's a difference between having just 3, like we saw what Utah just gave up for Jaren Jackson Jr. as like 3 just unprotected future picks. That's not the case with what the Lakers are offering. They're offering probably a mid-20s first round pick now, and then a couple of future picks way out, actually, which like is probably a better bet against where Luka and the Lakers could be in the early 2030s, but also you're not getting that satisfaction of like even the Jaren Jackson trade, they're getting 227 picks, which is next offseason, right? So you're getting a bit of immediate satisfaction with that, or relatively immediate compared to 2030. Like some GMs are not going to be in charge of their teams in 2031, let alone 2033 when the Lakers picks are going to hit. So those are valuable picks, to be clear. It's just, if you're trying to sell it to your ownership, you're trying to sell it to your fan base, it's harder to get excited about, oh, well, we got picks 5 years out, 7 years out. It's not as appealing as, we're going to have a pick in a couple potential high picks in 2027, right? Depending on, I think Lakers pick will be, I think 20s. So that one's like not the best pick, but yeah, I mean, I get it. I get the frustration, and so that offseason they didn't end up doing anything with the picks, and it ultimately allowed them to get Luka, because then they did the DFS trade, then later did the Luka trade, but the Luka trade wasn't in the plans. And I do think there's an alternate universe where the Luka trade never happens. They do another small move maybe right before the deadline, and we're looking at a really dire situation right now with like 80's injured. LeBron is headed toward potentially retiring or leaving, and then Max Christie is a bright spot. Austin Reaves is a bright spot. That it's like, okay, what else is here, right? So they got bailed out by Nico. Let's be honest about it. Like, Nico gave them a golden platter, and they benefited from that. And you could argue, hey, if they traded the picks, they wouldn't have had that. But if your strategy is just like wait for a GM to come hand you a player, I don't really like that strategy. I don't think that's a sustainable strategy. Jay Spares, thank you for the super chat. Rob sucks, but no one deserves that. No one deserves that. No one deserves that. That's not cool at all. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. If we were to land Giannis with AR staying, AR at 40 million, really worth it next to Luka and Giannis. Rather trade AR next deadline for fitting 3-and-D. And the Lakers could go that route, right? So that is a potential roster. I mean, you could potentially sign and trade AR in the summer, but that does hard cap the other team at, I believe, the first apron, if I'm not mistaken. Might be the second, but I think it's the first. Or you can just evaluate the fit with Luka, Austin, and Giannis over the first 40, 45 games of the season, and then flip Austin at the deadline. And like, that's the thing I keep hammering home, is that re-signing Austin does not mean you're committing to Austin for 4 or 5 years. You can still trade Austin, and trading him in the first year, ideally you work with him to find a destination he would be interested in. But if it ultimately comes down to it, you can flip him and recoup a lot of value, because that team will be getting him for multiple years. And that's why, in part, like the sticker shock with the Desmond Bane trade was because Orlando was getting him for so long that they were able to commit and give up that many first round picks. So I don't know if you're going to get, but I think if Desmond Bane went for 4 picks and Jaren Jackson Jr. went for 3 picks, and he's also locked up with an extension, I think you're getting at least 3 first round picks for Austin. So that is something they can consider. At the same time, if you are in a little bit more of a win now mode, because Luka's going to be 27, almost 20, turning 28 next year. Giannis is 31, going to be turning 32. You only have so long of a window there, but like, you can potentially do that or flip Austin for a different star or better fitting whatever. You can do that, but that's the key, is like, that's where I think people are underestimating Austin's potential value next year compared to now. I think there's a huge difference between what you could get trading Austin now versus next season. Yu-Gi-Oh! Thank you for the super chat. Why does Braun want to stay on a first round exit? I'm not gonna pretend to know what he's thinking or speak for him. My read on the situation is, it has been a dysfunctional partnership at times, but it has also been a fruitful and mutually beneficial partnership for both sides. And his family's here, his son's on the team. Look, as someone who just moved a couple weeks ago, the thought of having to move in season to a different, like, I know he's a billionaire and he can afford to have everything moved rather quickly and efficiently, but it's just, I think the uprooting of the situation, unless maybe it was Cleveland, but Cleveland's not even really a possibility. Like, I also just think if you look at the actual suitors, like if we go through, let's just go through it quickly of like, if we go through teams that like have a chance, right? And it is worth noting that Lakers actually moved up to number 5 tonight because Minnesota lost. I guess I missed that. So Lakers are number 5 for what it's worth. But okay, OKC, it's not happening. San Antonio, it's not happening. Denver, it's not happening. Houston, it's not happening. Minnesota, it's not happening. Phoenix, it's not happening. We go to the East, Detroit, it's not happening. New York, you could maybe do some sort of Cat or OG trade centered around one of those two. That's like a possibility, I guess. Boston's not happening. Toronto's not happening. Cleveland can't happen because of the second apron. Philly's not happening. And now we're getting into the plan. So I also think if you just look across, like Golden State, I guess, is another one you could throw in there, but they're they're further from contention than the Lakers are. So you also just look at it practically, there isn't really a situation out there to add LeBron or that can financially match his contract in a trade or where he would make sense. Like, I really think the only potential trade suitor that makes any sense would be New York. But even then, there's some complications in terms of if you're trading Towns, now you don't really have a center outside of Mitchell Robinson, and that becomes a little bit of a concern. Or if you're trading OG or McHale, that's taking away one of your 3-and-D wings, and now that's a bit of a hole on that roster. So I think part of it's just like that there isn't really an alternative. I think if there was an alternative, he might consider it. Maybe he would ask out. Maybe he would waive that no trade clause. But I just don't see a realistic alternative. Nala, thank you for the super chat. With little draft assets, it makes zero sense to not use abundant cap flexibility as an asset. The Kings prefer to get off DFS over 3 seconds for Keon. We need to take back some money here to get our guy. I agree with you. That's just not. And again, look, we always have to operate under the assumption that the Lakers do not leak things. It seems like the honest thing that there is some real smoke there. So that is one thing that, and I partially wonder if that is coming out to try to appease or calm the fan base in terms of letting them know that there's like a bigger plan here and that they're not just winging it, or that there is a vision for the summer, and that if they stand pat, it's not because they're not trying to do something, it's because they're trying to do something big. So I think that's partly why some of that stuff is coming out. But I'm with you. I think you have to take back some money. And now, if you do, like, let's even say they could trade for like Nic Claxton or Jared Allen. You trade for one of those guys. Like, that does impact your cap flexibility this summer, and it does impact your ability to get Giannis. I think it decreases it unless you're giving up Austin, and Austin has to agree to that because it would have to be a sign and trade. You are losing that to a degree, and if you really feel like you have a shot, then that's something you have to weigh. But in general, I think the notion of putting your entire offseason on either trading or signing players that's just a lot of pressure, and there's a lot that can go wrong. And if you look at recent history, first off, the free agent class isn't that good. You look at the free agent class, it's just not that good. Most of the best players are restricted free agents, which means that their team is in control of whether they retain them or not. As we've seen, even if teams don't agree with the price, teams will likely match it. And you have a situation in Denver with Peyton Watson where, like, he has emerged as a better piece, a bigger piece than a Cam Johnson and a Christian Brown. So if they have to trade one of those guys, they're going to trade one of those two, probably Cam Johnson. And I don't think it's going to be to the Lakers because they are a rival. So, like, there's just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of risk with that path where if you are willing to take on some money now, it's tough to say who that player is. Is that Andrew Wiggins? Is that Daniel Gafford? Like, and there's smaller deals you can make where you take on a little bit of money, or trade for Io and then re-sign him, like something like that, right? Like, there are smaller things you can do, but I agree in general that I don't love the premise of just kicking it all to the off season. And even then, I think what's the most optimistic outcome in the off season? You trade for Giannis, you keep Austin. Now you have like a tax mid-level exception and a bunch of vet minimum guys. I mean, what does that roster look like, right? So it's going to be tough, and I think they should try to build it now. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. We need to keep attacking the paint with AR back. Our big three can get downhill and attack the paint, can get easy baskets and get to the free throw line, which can create margin, shoot threes within flow of the offense. 100% agree with you. I think the Lakers need to take threes if they're open. Within reason, I think, like, especially the better, like, Rui should take any open three he has. I think Luka, LeBron, Austin should all take open threes. Jake, Marcus, and Vando, especially Vando in the corner, I'm okay with, as long as it's not too early in the shot clock. Like, sometimes they will just play off of him to the degree that it's like 14 left on the shot clock. I think that's a little early for some of the Vando threes, because you can kind of get that at any point in the possession because they're just going to ignore him. So I'd rather the Vando three come with like 10 seconds left, 8 seconds left, 6 seconds left, rather than 14, 15, like that early in the possession. But Jake and Marcus, for the most part, as long as they're open, I'm okay with it. But in general, to your point, I think the Lakers need to add more of a driving kick element and more of a downhill element. And that's where I think Austin's return is going to be huge. We already saw some of it tonight, and they need to do that more consistently, because some of the ISO balls, some of the stagnation, some of the post-ups, some of the just swinging side to side aimlessly, like they can sharpen that up and I think put more pressure on the paint. Uriel, I hope one of those was right. Buha. Do you see the Lake Show sticking with their crew till the offseason? Also, do you see Adu eventually becoming a key player. Love your streams. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot to hear that. So thank you. I still think there's a possibility of a small trade, and they're going to look to trade Gabe or Maxi or Dalton here. I'm not sure what's feasible, but yeah, if they're not even trading the second, that's where things get a little shaky here in terms of if you're just offering expirings to offer expirings and you don't want to take back money, it sort of just becomes for some teams, like which player would you rather have? And I think a lot of times, especially for the types of players the Lakers are trying to get, the team's rather just going to keep their player than trade for Gabe or Maxi or whatever. So I think you guys know I've been asked before odds of Lakers making a trade, and I think I'd gone at one point. My high was 60%, and then I think the second time I got asked it was like 55. I dropped it a little bit. I'm probably down to a 40% right now. I still think it's like reasonably high, and again, a very small move. I don't think they're doing some big trading the first or getting a starter or something, but I'm certainly like dropping by the day, by maybe even the hour that they're going to do something. But if they do something, I think it's going to be a rather small move. And then Adu, it's tough because we just don't know. So I don't feel like I can give a confident answer here in either direction. I don't think he's going to be a key player this year. And based on that and him almost, sitting out a lot of the year due to injury, that does probably decrease the likelihood that he's a key player next year, just because typically, especially for like a rookie, like you want to come in, play a certain amount, get your feet wet, get some reps, and then build off of that for next season. But Adu doesn't really have much to build off of for next season. And I also think with like the stretch the Lakers just had with how many guys have been injured at various points, this could have been a stretch that if Adu were healthy, he could have played more and could have contributed more and gotten those reps that he didn't get earlier in the season. So I think that's a missed opportunity, unfortunately, for him. So I'll probably bet more on year 3 being more of the emergence / breakout for Adu if it is going to happen. But I think it's just tough to say because he's been dealing with this knee situation or like the after effects, the side effects of this knee situation going on almost a year now. So anytime you have lingering stuff for this long, it starts to become a little bit of at least a yellow flag. And so I don't feel comfortable or feel like I have the clarity to project what he's going to be. I think we've seen some flashes with the athleticism, with the defense, Vando light. We've seen some of that, right? But I don't know what that will ultimately materialize in, I think, in the long run. Connor Phillips, thank you for the super chat, and thank you for being a member for 4 months. Sharpe's effort and rebounds would be amazing for us. I agree. I think a high motor, good rebounding, tough, physical, big man is, again, you can carry 3 centers on your team. It's not illegal. It's okay to do that. And he's just such a change up from Jackson and DA that I like, he's got this similar motor to Jackson, but Jackson's just not a good rebounder. There's a limitation there. Sharpe is. And I think we saw that tonight. So yeah, I'm with trading for him. Tiger Woods, again, thank you for the super chat. With LBJ likely gone next year, do we have to keep Rui and focus on 3-and-D and long-term build? Or big, excuse me. I don't think they have to keep Rui. I think Rui, it's partly dependent on the build. I've said this before, but if you're looking at a front court with Rui, I think you need to protect him with a good rim protector who's also a good rebounder, and then another good defensive wing who's a good rebounder. And 2 examples I constantly mention are Minnesota and OKC in terms of him playing next to like Hartenstein or Chet and then J-Dub, or him playing next to Gobert and McDaniels. I am skeptical that the Lakers could pull off those types of moves in turn, obviously not those specific players, but like just even getting an elite rim protector, high level center, and an elite 3-and-D wing. So I do think if the Lakers retain Rui and they are keeping Austin and Luka, I think Rui's probably still makes more sense as a bench player. And he could be a valuable bench player. He could be their sixth man. He could be a big piece off the bench. But I don't love. I think if from a defensive perspective, if you're starting games with Luka, Austin, and Rui, you're in the negative. Like you are minus defensively, and even like above average defenders at the 5 and the 3 are not saving that. You need like really good defenders there. So I guess, I mean, look, if you can land Walker Kessler or someone like that, that's a different story. I'm more okay with it because Walker is such a good rim protector, such a good rebounder that I become more open to Rui there. But if it's like running it back with DA, I don't like the DA Rui combo together. And you know, if it's DA and Jake LaRavia, like or DA and Marcus Smart, no, I don't think. I know the DA Marcus lineup has worked, but I don't think it's going to work against good teams and with a larger sample size. So I would say to your point, I would focus more on the 3-and-D wing and the long-term big. And if Rui just ends up being the starting 4, maybe he ends up being the starting 4. But I think those are the two things you have to nail in terms of your long-term center and your long-term 3-and-D wing. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat. Mike Conley most likely will be waived by Chicago. Better backup than Gabe. Good question. I admittedly have not been super tapped in with Mike Conley. I watch Timberwolves, but I'm not like studying his season. This year he has played 44 games, so he's missed a few. Started 9, so remember they moved him to the bench early in the season. Only 18 and a half minutes per game. They've slashed his role down a lot. Averaging 4 points per game, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, shooting 32% overall, 32% on threes. Hey, that's an upgrade on Gabe Benson. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's a marginal upgrade. I think Gabe, as much as Gabe can be picked on defensively, I actually think Mike Conley's worse than him defensively and could be picked on just as much in the same scheme, because I do think Gabe getting picked on is partly the scheme. Like Gabe is bigger than Mike Conley. He's stronger than Mike Conley. He's younger than Mike Conley. So I'm still okay. And he is shooting the ball better than Mike Conley this year. Now, I don't trust Gabe shooting, but you know, I just think if Minnesota like has needed a point guard, they've needed a playmaker, and the fact that they benched him and phased him out of the rotation a bit, and then ultimately were willing to salary dump him, I don't love that. So maybe you flip Gabe and have an opening and like you consider that, but even then I'd probably rather just take a shot on Kobe Buffkin, right? So I'm probably out on Conley, Chris Paul, those like I'm just not a big fan of small point guards in 2026. I just don't really think those guys should be playing playoff minutes. Nala, thank you for the super chat. You think no trade is related to ownership change? That's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of it that way. If you look at the Dodgers and the way they've operated, they've obviously gone big fish hunting or big game hunting, whatever. This would qualify as big game hunting. I mean, it's the biggest game right now in terms of Giannis is the best player to be available in a while. And remember, like Luka was never publicly available. Luka was privately available. If Luka became available, there would have been a giant bidding war for Luka. I think, frankly, a bigger bidding war because Luka's 5 years younger than Giannis. So you'd have Luka for a longer runway. So like the last time a player of this caliber was available, you might have to go back to 2019 KD, I guess, right? And even, then he was coming off of the injury and there was some uncertainty with like his future, but I mean, maybe even going back to like 2016 or maybe 2018 LeBron, 2016 KD. Like you're going back a while to like when a player of this caliber was on the market and people were gunning for their services. So I think maybe there's something to that of they look at the success they've had with the Dodgers in terms of acquiring big free agents or big players in trades, and they want to replicate that with the Lakers. I hadn't thought of that angle until you just asked it. I haven't, like, this is just speculation. I haven't heard anything with regards to that. But I think it's more so just the Lakers have looked at the market. They don't like the options. They don't think there's really anyone realistic for the first. They don't really want to trade the second if they don't have to. And they think they have a shot at Giannis or other high-level players this summer with the picks and the cap space. I think it's as simple as that. But I'm sure that the ownership is factoring into that to some degree. And again, looking at what they did with the Dodgers, I think there's a bit of a correlation, a bit of an analog there in terms of getting the big names and potentially doing that now with the Lakers. The more we know, 77. I need a Rui and Gabe trade injected in my veins. It's not happening, and I'm delusional. Well, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the chuckle here. I think the Gabe one is possible. I don't see Rui getting traded, which brings up an entirely different conversation about his future and if they're going to extend him or re-sign him or what's going to happen with him. I think it's like technically possible because he isn't expiring, and I think if the right player, if New Orleans asks for Rui in a Herb Jones trade, I think Rui is gone, right? But it's got to be a certain caliber of player. But Gabe's on the table. That they're trying to trade Gabe. The issue is they don't really want to attach anything, and that's where Gabe's value plummets a bit. Trucker Star, thank you for the super chat. Not giving a team who's 3 games away the second seed before the deadline with an MVP candidate, on your team is criminal acting from the front office. I assume you mean like not investing in this team, right? I think there might have been a word there missing. I'm just trying to piece together what you meant, but I assume you're saying, a team that's 3 games out of the 2 seed has an MVP candidate. Them not investing in this group is criminal. That's a fair way to look at it. I mean, I think we've talked through some of the nuances here where like the Lakers from a results perspective are certainly in the mix with the rest of the West. But when you look at their point differential, the net rating, how many double-digit losses they have, their record against above 500 teams, they are behind the pack in all of those things. So again, despite them technically being 5th right now and not being too far out from 2 or 3, when you factor in like their biomarkers, their biometrics as a team compared to the other teams just grade out much better. And I think I would just say I think most people around the league would, I think, have the Lakers a little bit lower than their record suggests. And I don't even think that's like a anti-Lakers thing. I think it's just they have won more games based on their statistical profile than they should. And like, that's just an element here that I think there's some skepticism as to like that they're not as good as their record, whether that's fair or not. Now, I mean, my biggest concern is just like more throughout the record, throughout the point differential, throughout the net rating. It's specifically the above 500 dynamic of just feels like for the past 2 months, anytime they played a good team that's reasonably healthy, they've lost that game. And so logic dictates that if they play a team like that in the first round, which they likely will, they probably would lose in round 1. But to your point, I mean, this is why, like, I think they've shown enough to be invested in. I think the issue is like what out there would elevate them to a level where you feel comfortable talking about them on. I don't think anything's going to put them on the OKC level, but like, could they get to the Denver level? And if you look at even the trades that have happened, like they weren't going to get Jaren Jackson Jr., they weren't going to get James Harden, they weren't going to get Darius Garland. They weren't going to get Jaden Ivey. So I don't know. It seems like Herb Jones isn't available. It seems like Gafford at least isn't available to the Lakers. Jared Allen, Don't know what Cleveland's going to do there. Nic Claxton, some people, including seemingly the Lakers, think it's too high of an asking price. You just go down the list and Wiggins, Miami's trying to get Giannis, so they might need that contract, or they might need to flip him for a first, although that could be an option for the Lakers. They just don't want to give up a first for him right now. So it's like there are some options, but they're not like the most. I don't think there's any no-brainer option right now, and that's where LA, I think if a no-brainer option presented itself, they would pivot, but I just don't see that happening as of right now before the deadline. But I'm with you. I understand. Fans want to win. Fans want to have it, feel like they have a shot this year. And I think with the right trade or trades, LA can be in that mix. So to your point, like, let's just say hypothetically, they are the fifth or sixth best team. Well, maybe if they could make the right move, they'd jump up to the third best team, right? Or something like that. So I hear you. I hear you. Drew, thank you for the super chat. If Rob does wait, and he does land Giannis, he becomes legendary, right? Landing Luka and Giannis, his haters have to keep hush if it happens. Yeah, I think he goes to demigod status, and there's nothing anyone could ever say about Rob if he lands those two. I mean, in all seriousness, I think that's true to an extent. It will be now on him to nail the rest of the roster, right? Because if he has a repeat of the 2021-22 season, I mean, that is going to go down as a special roster in NBA history where I can't remember a non-tanking team having a situation where like literally half of the roster was out of the league the following offseason for how bad they all were on their last legs. They all were bad. It was just a really poorly constructed roster. And so we've seen tanking teams have maybe situations like that where they have a bunch of veterans that just stink and like shouldn't be in the league or are on their way out. I can't remember a team that was trying to be competitive that had half of, we could go down the list of like Isaiah Thomas and Melo. I mean, Melo was actually solid for like, but like, Trevor Ariza, Wayne Ellington, like all these dudes were out of the league the next summer. They never played basketball again in the NBA. And it was just, it was just really rough. So point being, like, he has to nail the rest of the group. Otherwise, if there's a scenario where you trade for Giannis and then you don't nail it and you never win with Giannis and Luka, and like if you only won one with LeBron and AD and clearly didn't have a good end to the LeBron AD era, and then you never win with Luka and Giannis, that also kind of changes the legacy of, it's like, hey, he nailed the big things. He traded for AD, he traded for Luka, traded for Giannis, but if that netted one championship in like 12 years based on that top end talent and that firepower, I think there will be some fair criticism of that, because that probably should have resulted in more success. LZF31, thank you for the super chat. How do you like Luka, AR, Watson, Rui, Kessler lineup? I like that. This is a good example. I mean, these are two of the Lakers' top targets for next summer. So I think we'll see how realistic it is that they could actually land that. But Rui, I think Rui could fit next to Kessler and Watson. Watson is a plus defender. He's long. He's athletic. Like maybe not quite at like the ultimate wing stopper level that you would want, but solid, good enough, I think. And then you have Kessler, who is a really good rim protector. You have rebounding, like Luka is a really good rebounder. Austin's a good rebounder for a guard. Like Rui's clearly the worst rebounder here among the five, not even accounting for position, just like straight up. But that's okay, because you have Watson, you have Kessler, and then you also have Luka. So you have the passing and the ball handling with Luka and AR. You have a guy who could create his own shot and for himself and Watson. You have Kessler as a roller, lob threat, finisher, can punish mismatches, has a little bit of a post game. Then you have Rui spacing the floor. So yeah, I think that would work. Got to get a little creative with the finances, depending on what the numbers are for Watson and Kessler and how much Rui ultimately gets. But yeah, I do like that lineup. Harry Chinani, thank you for the super chat and thank you for being a member for a month. Do you enter arenas the same like fans or do you have special access? It depends on the arena. Like technically this arena, Barclays, we enter the same spot as everybody else. At crypto, we enter at the media entrance. I'm trying to think. MSG, we enter with everybody else. Actually, New York, it's a more everybody just kind of enters in the same spot. Like there's a designated media section to get your credential and go through security and stuff. But I would say it really depends on, some arenas have media only entrances. Some arenas, it's like media and arena workers. And then some it's just like basically media fans and everybody can enter there, but there's like a media section entrance, whatever. But then I get my credential and then that gives me special access to the media room, locker room, the court, and basically anywhere in the arena for the most part. So I would say the special access comes once I'm in the arena, not necessarily outside the arena or like entering it. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Seems like refusal to take back money might be because new ownership wants fresh plate, maybe clean house. There's a cap in the NBA. League is clearly trending towards youth and depth. I also think, I think that could be part of it. I also think that there is a sense that this roster wasn't built for Luka, and that if you think about it, I mean, they did not. I mean, this is why I continue to hammer this point, because even for as great as the Luka trade was, and it was clearly great, and I think it was a masterclass in negotiation, kept Austin out of it, kept the second pick out of it, kept it under wraps for weeks. It was on a need to know basis. Very few people knew about it, including JJ finding out late in the process. Like it pretty much was just Rob and Jeannie for the most part. A few people knew. So they handled that great, but they did not plan for that. They did not build the roster for that. And then they also did not build the roster for that in the summer. So I think to your point about cleaning house or fresh plate, I think there's a sense that this is not a Luka roster and that every player right now is under evaluation for, do you fit next to Luka? Do you fit on the next version of the Lakers? And they want to make the bigger changes to build more of a Luka roster, which we saw in Dallas 2024. You need a certain amount of length and athleticism on the perimeter. You need two-way guys. You need shooting. You need defense. Then you also need a certain amount of motor and energy and athleticism, lob threat, rim protection, rebounding from your big men. So I think it's more so like trying to recalibrate, restructure the team around Luka and what Luka needs, because almost, at least half this roster was built for LeBron and AD, not for LeBron and Luka and Austin. And even, not factoring in like what Austin was. Like, I think when they signed Gabe Vincent, Austin was ascending, right? He had the nice playoff run, but he was not this version of Austin. So even like Gabe Vincent technically was brought in to have a certain offensive role that he has never had and is never going to have as a Laker. So I think that to me would be the biggest thing, is like, I think they're trying to rebuild the roster, not rebuild, but rebuild the roster around Luka and make it more of a Luka team. Is he a real one? Veda, real MC, thank you for the super chat. Why does it seem so hard for the Lakers to trade expiring contracts? Usually teams love those. It's a good question. I think, again, like I referenced the Mike Conley thing because I think some people were taking it as like, well, Mike Conley just got dumped and like, why can't the Lakers do that? And I feel like they're underselling the part that Chicago got Jaden Ivey, who is not that far removed from being a top 10 pick and having a lot of buzz and hype around him, and seems like a good second team candidate in terms of thriving in a new situation. So that was the cost of doing business. And then they're also going to waive him and allow him to go somewhere else. So I think, frankly, like the Lakers have to attach, like they typically have to attach something. Okay, well, here's the thing. Usually the appeal of trading expirings is you get off something you don't want. right? Because you don't just trade expiring for an expiring. That doesn't make any sense. Again, unless you just think the other player is better. But the Lakers are offering players who do not have actual value. Like Gabe Vincent has had a bad season. Maxi Kleber is on his last legs as an NBA player. Dalton Connect has been a real disappointment. And so none of those guys have like inherently a lot of attractive trade value to suitors, right? You're not trading for Gabe Vincent, excuse me, as I break stuff in my hotel. You're not trading for Gabe Vincent to improve your team. You're not trading for Maxi Kleber to improve your team. Maybe you're trading for Dalton as like a low stakes gamble. But the appeal for the expirings is to get off of something that you don't want, which typically is extra years. The issue is the Lakers don't want to take on extra years. So let's just say, for example, Miami wants to create cap space and maybe they want to try the Lakers path of trying to trade for Giannis in the summer. They could be like, hey, we'll give you Andrew Wiggins for a first round pick. And you have Andrew Wiggins now under contract next year. But the Lakers don't want to do that. The Lakers don't want to take on Andrew Wiggins. They don't want to take on extra money. So that limits, again, at least based on the Windhorse report, the Lakers are, he's hearing, offering expirings without taking back money and without attaching anything to it. So it's like, no wonder they can't make a trade, because if you're just saying, hey, take Gabe Vincent and give us something good, why would any team do that? Why would they take Maxi Kleber for something? Like, you need to attach something, or you need to take something back. You need to incentivize the other team to trade with you. So the Lakers just offering expirings, again, it's only valuable if the other team is getting off of future money, but the Lakers don't want to take back future money. So that's where the Lakers are in a weird spot where it's like, it's kind of nonsensical of, we'll just take Gabe Vincent off of our hands and give us player X who's better. It's like, why would a team do that? You either need to put a second on the table, or that player better be making future money and you're giving that team some cap relief. But if you don't offer either of those two things, why would a team just take Gabe Vincent? That doesn't make sense. So that, it kind of clicked in my head, the best way to explain it once we got into it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's frankly just been, they don't want to give up anything extra and they don't want to take back anything extra. And if that's your parameters, then no one's going to trade with you. DJJ, thank you for the super chat. We know Ham wasn't the coach after Western Conference Finals. Even if Rob salvages this deadline, he's still got to go. No consistent plan, too dependent on external circumstances, bad talent evaluator, long-term liability. I've continued to say and report that I've heard he's not on the hot seat. There's no plan to move on from him at any point here in the near future. And I have referenced the Dave McMenamin report on Alan Sleewa's show that he said Rob is going to be in charge for the next 5 years. So I don't think that's going to change. Now, maybe if the offseason is a complete disaster, maybe that does pivot at some point and the Lakers take, a different stance on that. But to this point, I agree on a lot of the things you're saying in terms of the plan or lack thereof, some fortuitous circumstances that have benefited them. Ultimately LeBron, I mean, and this even precedes Pelinka. Technically he was there, though Magic was still there at the time, but like LeBron wanted to be a Laker. LeBron wanted to be in LA. They didn't have to sell LeBron that hard on being a Laker. Like, LeBron was a free agent. He chose to be there. He was planning to be there since 2017. He decided to go there. Then AD, because of the relationship with LeBron and with Clutch, wanted to go there so that they were able to do that. Then you had the Luka trade, which, we know the backstory with Nico approaching and Nico deciding, going rogue and deciding to trade him. Now Giannis, I guess we'll see what happens with that. But it's like some of the star stuff, they deserve credit for actually executing it. And like, it's one thing to have an interest from a star. It's another thing to actually do it, or in the Luka case, actually, make the trade. But I don't think you could just sit around and like hope a star is going to materialize out of thin air. And yeah, the talent evaluation, the last couple drafts have not been good. I think a lot of the minimum signings have been pretty underwhelming. especially at the 5, but also on the wing. And no roster is perfect, but that's also a bit of a cop out. Like, no roster is perfect, but I would argue the Lakers have had very imperfect rosters over the last few years, to the point of they just keep having players. Like I've said this before, but like the whole 5th starter debate is kind of funny to me, because on most other good teams, Marcus, Jake, and Rui would all be coming off the bench. Like there would be no, we need to start one of Marcus, Jake, or Rui. Like, put those guys on any of the other top teams in the West, and they're all coming off the bench. Like they're not, it's not even a conversation. Like they're not starting on Minnesota. They're not starting on OKC. They're not starting on Denver. They're not starting on Houston. They're not starting on San Antonio. Where are they starting? Right. So like the best teams like those guys are all bench players, but some, like, they're like the 5th and 6th men on the Lakers, right? 5th, 6th, and 7th. And that's where it's just a little bit of the roster. And this has been an issue for multiple years. So I hear you, and I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Yu-Gi-Oh! Thank you for the super chat. I almost feel like Rob should have included AR in the Luka trade to keep Max, maybe get a real center, and maybe not have included the draft capital. I don't know. I would have thrown in the 2nd first and kept Max out of it. I don't think. I think the Lakers would be in a worse spot right now if they had kept Max and put AR in, because AR's better. AR has more value. And I think we just saw it tonight. Like, without Austin, they don't have enough offensive ball handling and juice and like downhill attacking, at least with how the roster is currently constructed. That is a weakness when Austin is out. And if you just say, hey, well, then they could have tried to sign more of a scoring type. I mean, if you look at the guys who went in the price range of a Marcus or Jake, if you're saying like Max takes one of those guys' spots, then you replace that with like more of an offensive player. I don't think there was anyone close to as good as Austin available for like $5-6 million. So Austin's an incredible bargain. I mean, people can disagree with it, but he is a $40 million player and he's making $14 million. So that's a steal for them, where like Max is also outperforming his contract, but not to the same level. I think, he's maybe a $20 million player, whereas, Austin is much higher. But I do agree that I think, I would have put Dalton in it. They didn't want to put Dalton in it. I would have put Dalton in it. I would have put the 2nd first in it. I would have just kept Max out of it. Is he a real one? Veda, real MC. What do you think is roster plan, goals, A and B? For right now, it's just roll it into the summer, unless something pops up. And again, I keep checking Twitter just to make sure I'm not missing anything here. But no, I don't think so. But I think plan A is add Giannis, and plan B is add a couple of high-level starters, which I think a couple examples would be Peyton Watson, Walker Kessler. Unrealistic, I think, to get both, but like that type of player, and then maybe trade for another player, sign another player. So I think that those are the two big goals is get Giannis or another star who fits with Luka and Austin, and then get, otherwise like fill out the starting group. DJJ, I'll do you one better. Austin Reaves, he also wanted to come to LA when he could have gotten drafted by Detroit. It was technically a better situation there. Fair. That was another situation where Austin picked the Lakers and could have gone elsewhere. And yeah, there's some stories from that for another day. But yeah, I mean, he knew he was going to have a chance, let's just say, looking at the roster, the 2021-22 roster we talked about a little earlier. But yeah, another situation where, I mean, look, when you have good things happen to you, I don't think it's fair to just be like, oh, well, you're lucky, you're fortuitous, like you're fortunate, whatever. You can make your own luck. So I don't want to take away all of the, like, the results that Rob has had, and he made the Luka trade, right? Like, he won a champion. They won a championship under his guidance. So I don't want to take that away. I just also think when like the primary things we're talking about are sort of random, fortunate, lucky things, that's where it's just, it feels like it's unsustainable to continually rely on like these things always happening. But maybe they will. I don't know. Nala, gonna go. I'm at the 2-hour mark, so gonna go like a few more minutes here. I got a couple more from Nala. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Pre-agency is the new free agency. Restricted free agency won't be available. It literally doesn't make sense to not take back money right now. Giannis is not realistic. Most of the trades today had zero buzz leading in. Realistically, nobody knows. Reports are smokescreens. The current LA reports make zero sense. That's a fair pushback, and I tried to mention this earlier. Like, LA doesn't leak things, so maybe they are going to make some big trade. Maybe they are going to put the first on the table, but enough. I would just say it's been enough out there from enough people, and not only Lakers people, but just people around the league, that I think there is something to this Giannis situation and some real legs behind it. And I mean, the interesting thing is if Giannis gets traded, let's say tomorrow morning Giannis gets traded, now the Lakers are in an interesting spot where they have 24 hours to pivot and maybe make a move. So in a way, for those who don't want Giannis on the Lakers and don't think they should wait for him, Giannis getting moved before the deadline, but like ideally at least like a few hours until the deadline, because if he gets moved, deadline's 3 p.m. Eastern. If he gets moved at 2:59, it's like, okay, well, the Lakers have 1 minute to pivot, right? Or they probably get wind of it earlier, but less time to pivot. I think that ideally for them, Giannis, if he's going to get traded at this deadline, it needs to be like in the next day or so, and give them at least a few hours, if not more time, to pivot and like try to make some moves. But I agree. I mean, I've not been, again, I'm not, I'm merely the messenger here. I'm not saying I agree with their strategy. I think there's a lot of downside to their strategy. I think there's a lot of risk to their strategy. I'm more so just sharing what I'm hearing behind the scenes and trying to analyze it as best I can. But again, I mean, if Giannis gets traded now or in the summer, not to the Lakers, Walker Kessler stays, Peyton Watson stays, Tari Eason stays. Maybe Dort gets traded to an Eastern Conference team. Where's this player coming from? Where are these players coming from? I don't know. That's what the Lakers got to figure out. All right, going a couple more minutes here. See, there's some chat about cones. Kane Carter, hey Jovan, what I will say is in 2023 vibes were low after they missed out on Kyrie. Then right before the deadline, they made moves. They make their best moves in the shadows and don't let leaks out. Yeah. I mean, that was obviously the Russ trade. I mean, the Rui trade came out of nowhere. That was, of course, earlier in mid-January. I believe it was like January 17th or something like that. Then they had the Russ. I mean, they were hoping to flip Russ for Kyrie. That ended up not happening. They would not put Austin or Max Christie on the table in that. And then then there was some buzz about Utah or Toronto being a potential third team for the Lakers in a Russ trade, but it was unclear who the other team was going to be. And then it ended up being Utah and Minnesota. So yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say though, in a little bit of pushback to this, was it was known that they were trying to trade Russ. So it wasn't a surprise that they traded Russ. They had been trying to trade Russ all season, and they nearly traded him before the season to Indiana for Miles Turner and Buddy Hield. So like, the fact that they traded Russ wasn't necessarily surprising. I would say the circumstance, the context of them trading him was a surprise, but it was clear the writing was on the wall with Russ. He was miserable. They were miserable. They wanted to move him. And it was just a matter of whether it was going to be then or like the offseason. And they had tried different iterations of trading him. It just didn't work out. So I would say right now there's been so much smoke with them standing pat and having a real shot at Giannis. And I think, I'd heard some things. I know Pete Zayas had heard some things. Anthony Irwin had heard some things. But when you have Mark Stein come out and say it, he's been doing this for over 20 years. Mark Stein does not miss with his information. So, I mean, who knows if we're all getting it from the same source or similar sources or whatever. Like, that's obviously a possibility. But when he comes out and reports what he reported tonight, I think that's a pretty big deal. And to me, there's certain people, obviously Shams, but Windhorst, Stein, there's certain people that are, Chris Haynes, they're at the top of the industry in terms of the information, the news breaking, the stuff that they know. And when they are reporting something like that, I think it carries a little bit more weight. Tan Man, thank you for the super chat. Can we trade Gabe and Maxey for DeMar, sixth man? DeMar is making 24.5, so I don't think that would work. I think you would have to do something. You'd have to throw Dalton in there. I have shared my reservations about trading for DeMar. He is a minus shooter and defender, so I think the Lakers ideally need wings who can shoot and defend, and DeMar does neither of those. So, yes, he would be a nice bench scorer, but I don't think you could really play him with Luka, LeBron, and Austin. I think you got to stagger. You already have to stagger those three, but I think you have to now stagger DeMar within that. So I personally would be out on a DeMar trade, but I'm checking right now to see if it works with Dalton. They would just then have three guys. It does work with Gabe, Maxey, and Dalton works for DeMar, but then Lakers need to sign two more players. King, actually works for the King. I feel like they would have too many players, but maybe they wouldn't. But yeah. OMG, hey Jovan, we have to go all in for Wiggins and sign a setter and buyout. I mean, I will say I'm still on the fence. I'll just let you guys know where I'm at, and I know not everyone's gonna agree with my perspective, but I'm firmly in. If you could get Herb Jones, Jared Allen, or Nic Claxton, I would give up a first and Rui for any of those three players. When you get to Wiggins and Daniel Gafford, I think that caliber of player is I think a clear starting level player, but they're obviously a little bit older and they come with some injury concerns or contract concerns or just how long they can be pieces of your rotation. I think that's where I'm more iffy on the first round pick. If I woke up tomorrow and the Lakers traded a first round pick for Wiggins, I wouldn't hate it, but there is real risk with trading the first for Wiggins. Same thing with Gafford. I wouldn't love including Rui in that, but at the same time, I mean, you also have to, is Rui going to then fit around some of the new pieces? That's its own question. So, but those are really the guys I would consider a first for. Everyone else, I don't think I would do it for Io. And then you go down the list, and I just don't think, and I have Najee, Sadiq Bey, Sharp, Okoro, Agbaji. None of those guys are worth a first in my estimation. I think it's Herb, Claxton, Allen as no-brainers, and then Wiggins and Gafford are iffy ones for me. But if they get a wing and then they sign a center, I'm not opposed to that. I see Wiggins is very polarizing. A lot of people don't like him. I can see that in the chat. Pastard, isn't Clax same as Jax, thinner than Jax? Claxton is much better than Jackson Hayes at basically everything other than dunking the ball. He is a better rebounder. He's a better defender. He's a better rim protector. He's a better passer. He's a better ball handler. So, I mean, if you're talking like actual body type, like they are similar. I think Jackson's a little bit taller and stronger, especially now that he's put on some weight and strength this year. But I think people, because Brooklyn's basically been Siberia for the last 3 years, people forget how good Nic Claxton was as recently as a couple of years ago. And I think there's despite some of the physical similarities between the two, I think there's a huge talent, skill, and production gap between Claxton and Jackson. But as Eric says, I agree with this. Best possible long-term option at center is Walker Kessler. 100% agree. That's why going back to last year, I had Kessler ahead of Nic Claxton on my trade target list. I still would prefer Walker Kessler. I think he's another guy who's been in Siberia and Utah that gets overlooked. That I think, like he's not the same player, but I think there's a lot of Zubats potential there for him, where he could just, especially with the right pick and roll partner. I mean, he's not really had a good pick and roll partner in Utah this whole time, but I think he can grow with Luka, with Austin. Really good rebounder on both ends of the floor, really good rim protector. And I see a potential Zubats path, which last year, I mean, Zubats was getting third team All NBA votes, was getting All-Star consideration. By all accounts, was a top 5 center in the league. I think that's in the cards for Kessler. Where's the balances? We've been saying Kessler for years now. It's not happening. And then Pastor asks if there's a chance to get Kessler. I don't think so right now. I think potentially in the summer, once Utah's had some more time to evaluate the Jackson Markkanen fit, maybe they decide to move on from Kessler at a certain price. But I would say it's pretty low probability. I'm not going to repeat what Andre Miller said, but it is pretty funny for those looking in the chat. Yeah, I'm not saying they're going to get Kessler. I'm just saying that would be my preferred guy. That's all I was saying. The Lakers, yo, what's up, Jovan? What up? Tommy Gold says Dort, Watson, Io, Kessler in the summer. I would take any of these guys in a heartbeat. Dort, my only thing, like the shooting is a little bit of a concern, and it's clearly been a concern for OKC, but he is so good defensively that I think you overlook that. And then, Watson and Kessler, you easily slide into your starting lineup. Io, I think, is a little too small to be the other perimeter guy next to Luka and Austin, but could be a 6th man of the year type player. So I like him too. And Smokey says it's a next season move, Jovan. They are re-signing Kess. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting if the Lakers offered, if they miss out on Giannis and they have the 2 picks, I would offer 2 picks for Kessler and see if they would do a sign and trade. But even then, they might not do it. Keon Park asks when my plane is. My plane's at 8 p.m., so I got some time, 8 p.m. local time. But I am about to wrap here. I'll wrap on this because I think it touches on a lot of the things we talked about tonight. From King Carter, hey, Jovan, why does it seem like Rob and Genie don't care about Luka and LeBron's legacies and want to give them the best shot to win? It's driving me nuts as a LeBron fan because it breaks my heart to go all in. It's a fair question, and I think, this is a question LeBron and Clutch have been asking the Lakers for years now. This is not a 2026 thing. This has been a 2021 thing, a 2022 thing, a 2023 thing. There's been more of a sense of urgency on their side and like wanting LA to go all in, and they have not for the most part, right? Like since the Rush trade, they have not. I don't think they've really like gone all in. I don't consider the Luka trade an all in move. I consider that a no brainer. Go get the 25-year-old superstar move, right? So they have not cashed all their chips in, and they have been more reactive and passive than aggressive and proactive. I think they care about the franchise's legacy, and I think now they care about Luka's legacy and want him to win championships as a Laker, and what that would mean for the fan base, what that would mean for Luka. But I think they think that their best chance to do that is to let things go into the summer and make big moves in the summer and basically just see how this year goes, and maybe they win a round or two, and that's that. So, look, we'll see. This is the current information I have. This is the current information that's out there. Maybe the Lakers surprise us all, trade the first, make a big move. But yeah, well, we'll see. But I am going to Keon Park, thank you for gifting 5 memberships. I really appreciate that, man. Thank you. Hans says, I think appreciate it, Keon. So he became a member. Drew the Legend. Shout out to all the new members. I appreciate that, Keon. That's very thoughtful. And then Ryan Lucas. Sorry, I didn't see. Tan Man. I guess I missed a couple. Tan Man said, Gabe, Maxi second for Io and Sadiq. Swap Rui. I don't think you're getting Io or Sadiq for a second or even a swap. I think they're going to want more. I think Io's a multiple second guy. Sadiq's probably a 2-second guy. So I don't think they have enough for them right now. And then Ryan Lucas says, LA have deals ready if Giannis news breaks. It's a good question that I don't have great clarity into. I still think there's a sense that they would want to try and have the cap space this summer to potentially acquire another star or sign and trade someone or sign someone in free agency. So I still think even if the Giannis trade happens, they might roll it over into the summer, but I don't have a clear answer on if there are deals ready, which I guess we'll see in the next 36 hours or so. But appreciate you guys. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you so much for rocking with me for over a couple hours. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. If you made it to the 2-hour mark or some chunk of this, I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe for future content. I will be going live, of course, on Thursday. I'm going to be doing a trade show going into the trade deadline, and thinking between 9 and 10 a.m., depending on what's happening in the morning. But I'm leaning toward 9 a.m. and just go from like 9 to 12:30, and we'll talk through what the Lakers potentially do, and then into taking your questions and analyzing it post deadline, and then be back on Friday with another post deadline show with Andy Kamenetsky of Lockdown Lakers and ESPN LA. Probably not going live tomorrow unless something happens. If the Lakers make a trade, I will go live, but it is my last day out here, and I'm going to be traveling tomorrow. So want to spend some time with my brother and sort of have a little bit of calm before the madness. But of course, that means the Lakers will make a trade or Giannis will get traded. I think if Giannis gets traded, I probably have to go live and talk about it. But appreciate you guys. For those on the audio side, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back likely, well, at least on Thursday, but potentially on Wednesday. Hope you all enjoyed the rest of your night. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Talk to you all soon.